Every time I get into a new hobby, I always want to build everything related to the hobby myself. Want to fly drones? Buy a kit and build one. Want to play ping pong? Obviously got to put together a custom paddle. Want to play video games? Well, that's going to need a home-built PC. Want to learn how to play guitar? Well, of course, you're going to need to build a whole guitar first. That last one is the reason for this video. I recently got curious about filming and making videos, and also I've wanted to get better at guitar for a long time. The problem is the guitar I built 15 years ago. And at the time, I was way more excited about finishing the project than doing everything right, so it has quite a few issues. The glue seam is really ugly, some of the frets are popping out, and the back of the neck is a different shape every couple inches. But most importantly, it buzzes really bad when you play it. After reading up on my options for addressing the buzzing, I came to the conclusion that I'm going to have to start by replacing all these worn-out frets. So after watching a bunch of videos and slowly hacking together or buying the tools I needed, I think I'm ready to go. So what causes a note to buzz? When you fret a note on the guitar, you're shortening the string to the distance between that fret and the bridge. And when a note is played and the string vibrates, if it touches any of the frets closer to the bridge, you'll get a buzzing noise. This could be caused by the string being too close to the frets and not having enough room to vibrate. Or if all the frets aren't perfectly the same height, the string will buzz on the frets that are higher, which is what I think our issue is. Now, you could raise the string high off the fretboard and avoid this altogether, but then the guitar becomes uncomfortable to play. So the primary goal for this project is to get the strings to a reasonable height and remove all the buzzing. One way to measure the string height is to hold down the first fret so you have a consistent reference point, and then check the height on the low and high E strings at the 12th fret. So after accidentally adding some new accents to my desk, it's now time to take the guitar apart and get it ready to work on. It's really important throughout this whole process that the neck stays perfectly straight. So we'll check that with this cool little notched straight edge. An electric guitar neck usually has something inside it called a truss rod. The truss rod adds some rigidity to the neck, and in the case of the one in this guitar, can force the neck to bend either forwards or backwards depending on which way you adjust it. So I'll make some minor adjustments and let the wood settle and check again until it's perfectly straight. On to removing the old frets. This is Fretwire, and it's made of two parts. The crown, which is what you see, and the tang that holds the fret in the fretboard with these little barbs. Since I need to remove the old frets, if I were to just try and pry them out, the barbs might rip up the wood fibers in the fretboard. But a cool trick I learned while researching this is that you can heat up the frets to prevent that from happening. We'll need a soldering iron, solder, and flux. First, add a little flux to the frets. This just helps the solder to bond with the fretwire. And the solder itself is what allows for a clean transfer of heat from the iron to the fret. And after we've heated it up for a few seconds, it's time to try and pull. Not too bad. I couldn't remember if I did or not, but it looks like I definitely didn't glue these in originally. So my laziness probably worked to my benefit here. And you can see what I mean here with the wood fibers being pulled up. You can see it a little bit, but this looks great to me. No major chips. Now we've got a little bit of work to do before installing the new frets. And first I'll create a flat reference on the fretboard. Now that we have that, let's flip it over and take a look at the back. It's a little hard to see in the video, but the back of this neck is really wavy. And since that's what you're touching when you play, you want it to be smooth and consistent. You can see a little better here what I mean after I've sanded a bit, how we have some low spots and different contours up the length of the neck. So I tried to get rid of that by creating a flat reference for my contour, and after shaping a bit, just did the final touches by feel. It's hard to see when it's sanded like this, but here's what the final product's gonna look like. Way smoother and feels a lot better. Okay, back to the fretboard. We took some wood off the back, so we gotta make sure it's straight again. Now, if you've ever picked up an electric guitar, you might have noticed that the fretboard is not actually flat. Electric guitar fretboards have what's called a radius. Having it makes playing the guitar more comfortable because it matches the natural curvature of your fingers. I'm going to be doing a 12-inch radius on this fretboard, which is kind of in the middle, maybe on the flatter end. Now, because we just made our fretboard curve, we're going to have to do the same thing to the Fretwire before we install the frets. And here's a great example of why sometimes you should just buy the tool instead of hacking your own together. I made this fret bender with plywood, bolts, some skateboard bearings, and then even had to adjust it with some washers I took straight off the guitar to get it to work. I'll skip over all my frustrated tinkering, but after a little bit of messed up fret wire, we've got some pre-bent frets. While I'm running all over my apartment finding these frets as I cut them to length, here's our checklist for what we need to do to install the new frets. We'll save these last four for after we apply the finish to the neck. Cutting the slots to the right depth is easy enough. We just want to try and match the curve of the fretboard while we do it. And then it's time to hammer in the frets. For that, I'm going to be using this brass fretting hammer that I made. Unlike the fret bender, I'm actually pretty proud of this. It's what's called a dead blow hammer. And inside it has pellets or sand that make it so that when you hit, it just dies and doesn't bounce. That should make it much less likely that I accidentally bounce off the fret and ding the fretboard. And this brass face will prevent any damage to the frets themselves. Here's where I ran into an issue, and it goes all the way back to when we added the radius to the fretboard. Ideally, when you seat the frets, you would seat the two ends and then hammer down the middle, which is why you slightly overbend the fret wire before you install it. As you can see, when I'm hitting one end, it's unseating the other end. This shouldn't be happening, and I came up with a couple reasons why I think it is. One, I might not have overbent the fret wire enough. Or after I did, it settled back to flatter than I had it. But two, take a look at this. Now, I filmed this after I was done, but this is a 12-inch radius gauge. And as you can see here, there are little gaps at the edges. All I can think is that wood warps, and I shouldn't have trusted a sanding block that's been in an attic for 15 years. So now, when I hammer the fret ends, that steep angle is acting like a lever and popping the other end of the fret out. The frets are already cut, so I can't rebend them. I could redo the whole fretboard and buy new fret wire, but I don't really want to wait weeks for everything to show up and do it all over again. So I went ahead and just hammered in the rest of the frets. As you can see, there are little gaps on the ends of most of these frets. My thought is to hold the ends flush with the fretboard and then glue the frets in, but I need to find a way to hold them down. There are fancy, expensive fret presses, or maybe I could clamp that same sanding block onto the frets after adding the glue, but then I can't see if it's worked until it's too late. So I'm wandering around my apartment trying to come up with something when I came across this box of yo-yo strings, and then I thought of something. The idea is to make a loop with the string and feed it over the edges of the frets, and then just twist the back with a pen to tighten the ends down. Then we can apply some glue and see if it holds. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. Just 20 more to go. I don't know if this will hold for the next 10 years, but for right now, I'm happy with it. Now we can just clean up the ends of the frets and do some final touches before applying the finish. But first, to fix all these little gaps in the seam along the fretboard, I just scored a line down the entire seam and then used a triangle file to make a shallow groove. And then I mixed some sawdust and wood glue to fill the groove and then cleaned it off and sanded it. The color didn't end up matching perfectly, but I think this way it looks way cleaner. Onto the bane of my existence. I should have never touched this. There was a tiny screw broken off in the headstock, and I thought, let's try and fill that hole. First, I tried just a little sawdust and wood glue, but I guess the metal made it look really off color. So then I tried to remove the screw, probably with the wrong tools, and try again. And wow, it just looks 100 times worse. But I thought, third time's the charm. So I bought a chisel, tried to teach myself how to use it, and inlaid a new piece of wood in its place. Now, it's way more noticeable than that tiny dot we started with, but I think it looks pretty decent. But now we're in the final stretch. I can now apply the finish to the neck and start leveling the frets. If you remember from the beginning, this is the most crucial step to reaching our goal of eliminating the buzz. The concept is simple, but we'll just have to make sure everything is perfect. If you imagine an exaggerated version of our frets like this, we're going to file the tops until all are exactly the same height. Then we'll file the corners to bring back some of the roundness, and then run some sandpaper across to reach that final roundness where all the frets are still the same height. final touch on the frets, which really makes the neck comfortable to play, is rounding over the ends of the frets and removing any of the sharp edges. There's a special little file with one flat end and one rounded end for this. We'll use the flat end to knock off the corners, and then use the rounded end to round over the rest of the fret. And then after a little polish, the frets should be done. And we're finally done with all the repairs. So it's time to put everything back together and set up the guitar.
Oh my.
I don't even know what to say at this point. This has to be a metaphor for something in my life. I think it's just going to stay here as a reminder that sometimes your efforts are futile. Alright, back to setting up the guitar. Without setting up the guitar properly, all that effort with the frets really won't mean anything. So we'll start by tuning it up, stretching out the strings, and setting an initial string height for the low and high E strings. I'm going to optimistically go for a little lower than what we started with. And after those are set, we make sure the other strings are adjusted to match the fretboard radius. Pretty good start. We've got a little bit of buzzing, so it's on to setting the neck relief, which is just how much the neck is bending forward. Before installing the neck, I had added a little tension to counteract the string tension, so I'll let that off a little bit. And now it's feeling pretty good. Next, we'll set the intonation, which is basically just micro-adjusting the individual string lengths so that notes are in tune across the fretboard. And then set our pickup height, and we're done. Let's take a look at the final product. I'm honestly really happy with how this turned out. It's not perfect, Headstock. Like there's some discoloration around the frets, and the fret ends might not hold forever, I don't know. But the buzzing is gone, and it feels a whole lot better to play. It's just way more comfortable. We managed to get the string height down to 1.75 millimeters and 1.5 millimeters. And we've gotten rid of the buzzing. I know it's anecdotal, but to me it feels way more comfortable, and I think I just enjoy playing it more now. And it was nice working on a project again. It's definitely been a while. If you've worked on stuff like this before, was there anything I did insanely wrong, or do you have any tips on what I could have done better? I'm sure I'll be tackling something like this again in the future. Who knows, maybe I'll finally get around to building a whole new guitar someday. But anyway, if you stuck around this long, thanks for watching, and let's play this thing.